When a white teacher mocked a black student in front of the entire class, he thought his words would go unchecked. But what he didn't expect was the student's mother showing up at school, ready to confront his behavior. What she said and did left him completely speechless. This isn't just a story about one child's humiliation. It's a powerful lesson about accountability, respect, and the courage to stand up against injustice. What happens next will inspire and challenge your perspective. Stay tuned to see how this intense and eye-opening encounter unfolds. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that ignite change and inspire action. It was a typical weekday morning in Green Hill Middle School, where students settled into their seats, backpacks slung under desks, and pencils scratching across notebooks. Among the bustling classroom of 7th graders was Maya Thompson, a bright and determined 13-year-old with dreams of becoming a scientist. Maya was known for her curiosity and sharp mind, but she often felt out of place in a school where she was one of the few black students in her grade. Despite the challenges, Maya excelled academically, earning top grades in most of her subjects. Maya's science teacher, Mr. Whitaker, was a seasoned educator in his late 40s. Known for his sarcastic remarks and strict demeanor, he had a reputation for favoring certain students while being dismissive toward others. To some, his jokes seemed harmless, but for Maya, they often carried an undertone of condescension and bias that left her feeling singled out. Mr. Whitaker's attitude reflected a subtle but persistent prejudice that Maya had learned to navigate quietly. The classroom itself was bright and well organized, with colorful science posters on the walls and rows of desks neatly arranged. Students chatted softly as Mr. Whitaker prepared the day's lesson on the periodic table of elements. Maya sat near the middle of the room, flipping through her textbook and jotting down notes. She was eager to participate in the class discussion, as science was her favorite subject. However, the atmosphere shifted when Mr. Whitaker began calling on students to answer questions. When Maya raised her hand to respond, he rolled his eyes and smirked. "Maya," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "are you sure you can handle this one? I wouldn't want to confuse you with anything too complicated." The class fell silent, some students exchanging awkward glances while others suppressed laughter. Maya froze, feeling a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She hesitated before answering, her voice steady but subdued. "Yes, Mr. Whitaker, I'm sure." The tension in the room lingered as Mr. Whitaker moved on, making another comment under his breath that Maya couldn't quite hear, but knew wasn't kind. This wasn't the first time she'd been the target of his dismissive remarks, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. That evening, Maya shared the incident with her mother, Karen Thompson. Karen was a fierce and intelligent woman who worked as a civil rights advocate. She had always taught Maya to stand up for herself and never let anyone make her feel inferior. Hearing about Mr. Whitaker's behavior, Karen's expression hardened. "This isn't just about you, Maya," Karen said, her voice firm but comforting. "It's about making sure no one else is treated this way. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a word with Mr. Whitaker and the school." Karen's determination was palpable. She wasn't just Maya's mother, she was her fiercest advocate, and she was prepared to confront the situation head-on. The next day, Maya walked into the classroom with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. She wasn't sure how things would unfold, but she trusted her mother's ability to address the situation. Karen Thompson wasn't someone who backed down, especially when it came to standing up for her daughter. The class began as usual, with Mr. Whitaker handing out a worksheet on chemical reactions. As Maya worked quietly, she felt his eyes on her. When he approached her desk, she braced herself. "Maya," he said in his familiar condescending tone, "let's see if you actually understand this one." Maya looked up, her jaw tightening. "I do, Mr. Whitaker," she replied, keeping her voice calm. She held up her completed worksheet, her answers neatly written. He skimmed it briefly and smirked. "Surprising," he said loud enough for the whole class to hear. Some students laughed nervously, while others exchanged uncomfortable glances. Maya's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but she didn't let herself react. She knew her mother would be arriving soon, and that gave her a sense of reassurance. Karen Thompson walked into the school's front office with the confidence of someone who knew her worth. She introduced herself to the receptionist and explained that she needed to speak with Mr. Whitaker immediately. The receptionist hesitated, but the urgency in Karen's tone left no room for argument. Moments later, Karen was escorted to the classroom. The door opened, and the sight of Maya's mother standing there silenced the students instantly. Karen, dressed in a sharp blazer and carrying a folder, scanned the room before locking eyes with Mr. Whitaker. "Mr. Whitaker," she began, her voice calm but firm, "may I have a word with you?" He blinked, clearly caught off guard. Sure," he said, glancing uneasily at the students. "Why don't we step outside?" Karen shook her head. "No need. I believe this conversation should happen here, in front of the students." The tension in the room was palpable. Maya looked at her mother, her heart pounding, but she felt a surge of pride. Mr. Whitaker's usual confidence seemed to waver as Karen stepped further into the room. Karen addressed the class first, her tone measured and professional. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Thompson, and I'm Maya's mother. I understand that classrooms are places of learning and respect, and I'd like to ensure that's what's happening here." She turned her attention to Mr. Whitaker. "Yesterday, Maya shared with me some of the comments you made during class. It seems that your words and behavior have not been as respectful as they should be." Mr. Whitaker's face reddened. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "I treat all my students fairly." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Fairly? Let's examine that. You've singled out my daughter multiple times, undermined her intelligence, and made sarcastic comments in front of her peers. Would you consider that fair treatment?" The students exchanged glances, some nodding subtly. Mr. Whitaker's discomfort grew as Karen's words struck a nerve. Karen opened the folder she had brought and pulled out a small notepad. "I've documented what Maya shared with me," she said, "and I've spoken with other parents who've heard similar stories from their children about your behavior. This isn't an isolated incident." Mr. Whitaker glanced nervously at the students who were now paying close attention. "Look," he said, his voice faltering, "I didn't mean to offend anyone. I might use humor to engage the class, but it's never personal." Karen's expression remained steady. "Humor at the expense of a child's confidence is never appropriate," she said. "As an educator, your role is to uplift your students, not tear them down. Maya deserves respect, just like every other student in this classroom." The weight of Karen's words hung in the air, and for the first time, Mr. Whitaker seemed to grasp the impact of his actions. "You're right," he mumbled. "I didn't think about how it might come across." Karen nodded, her voice softening slightly, but remaining firm. "It's not enough to avoid thinking. You need to actively ensure your classroom is a space where every student feels valued and respected. That starts with you." The students watched in awe as Karen dismantled the power dynamic that had allowed Mr. Whitaker to behave as he had. It wasn't just a confrontation. It was a lesson in accountability, respect, and standing up for what's right. The classroom was silent as Karen Thompson's words settled over the room. Mr. Whitaker, usually confident and in control, stood frozen, his attempts to justify his actions unraveling under Karen's steady gaze. The students, some watching wide-eyed, seemed to realize they were witnessing something significant, a moment where power was being challenged and fairness demanded. Karen turned to the students, her voice calm but purposeful. "You all come here to learn," she said, addressing the room. "To grow, to ask questions, and to explore your potential. Your teachers should be your guides, helping you achieve that, not putting you down or making you feel small. My daughter, Maya, is a bright young woman who deserves the same respect as anyone else in this room." Maya felt her heart swell with pride as her mother spoke. Karen's words weren't just for her. They were for every student who had ever felt singled out or diminished. Karen shifted her attention back to Mr. Whitaker. "Your comments yesterday and in the past didn't go unnoticed. Students may not always speak up, but they hear every word you say. Those words carry weight, Mr. Whitaker. You might think they're harmless, but they can affect how a child sees themselves and their abilities." Mr. Whitaker swallowed hard, clearly struggling to respond. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, his voice faltering, "I never intended to harm Maya, or any student. If I said something that came across wrong, I apologize." Karen nodded slightly, but didn't let up. "An apology is a start," she said. "But this is about more than words. It's about accountability and making sure this doesn't happen again." She paused, then added, "Have you ever considered why you might treat some students differently? Why you might doubt their abilities or make assumptions about what they're capable of?" Mr. Whitaker looked down, unable to meet her eyes. I hadn't thought about it that way," he admitted. Karen continued, her tone firm but not unkind. "It's time you start thinking about it. Bias, whether intentional or not, affects how you treat people. As a teacher, your actions have a lasting impact on your students. It's your responsibility to recognize that and do better." At that moment, the door opened, and the school principal, Mrs. Reynolds, stepped in. A no-nonsense woman with decades of experience, Mrs. Reynolds had been informed of the situation by the front office staff. She surveyed the room quickly before addressing Karen. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "I've been made aware of the incident, and I'd like to thank you for bringing it to my attention. As educators, we have a duty to create a safe and respectful environment for all our students. If that hasn't been the case here, we need to address it immediately." Karen acknowledged the principal with a nod. "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. I believe this is an opportunity for growth, not just for Mr. Whitaker, but for the entire school. This isn't about one incident. It's about setting a standard for how every student is treated." Mrs. Reynolds turned to Mr. Whitaker, her tone professional but firm. "Mr. Whitaker, I'll be meeting with you after this class to discuss these concerns in detail. In the meantime, I expect you to reflect on what's been said here and ensure your classroom is a space of respect moving forward." Mr. Whitaker, now visibly humbled, nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll do better." Karen looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "I hope you do, Mr. Whitaker. Not just for Maya, but for every student who looks up to you as a guide and mentor. You have the power to build confidence, or to destroy it. Choose wisely." With that, Karen turned to Maya, her face lighting up with a proud smile. "Maya," she said, "you are smart, capable, and deserving of respect. Never let anyone make you doubt that." Maya smiled back, her confidence restored. "Thank you, Mom," she said softly. As Karen prepared to leave, she addressed the class one last time. "I hope you all remember this moment," she said. "Never be afraid to stand up for yourself or for others. Respect is something we all deserve, and it starts with holding each other accountable." The students nodded, their expressions thoughtful. For many of them, this was the first time they had seen an adult stand up to a teacher in such a composed but powerful way. It was a lesson in courage, respect, and the importance of speaking out against unfairness. After Karen left the room, the atmosphere in the classroom was noticeably different. Mr. Whitaker, still visibly shaken, took a deep breath before addressing the students. "I owe you all an apology," he said. "I realize now that some of my comments might have been hurtful. That wasn't my intention, but I see how my actions could have come across. I'll work on being better, and I hope you'll hold me to that." The students were surprised by his admission, but many appreciated the effort. For Maya, it felt like a turning point, not just for herself, but for the entire class. The day's events had left a lasting impression on everyone involved. But what Mr. Whitaker didn't know was just how formidable Karen Thompson truly was. Later that afternoon, as the school principal, Mrs. Reynolds, reviewed the details of the incident, she decided to do a bit of research into Karen's background. What she discovered left her both impressed and slightly stunned. Karen Thompson wasn't just a concerned mother. She was a renowned civil rights attorney with years of experience fighting for justice and equality in education. Her work had resulted in landmark policy changes in schools across the state, ensuring fair treatment and opportunities for all students. Mrs. Reynolds quickly realized that Karen's presence in their school wasn't just about one teacher's behavior. It had the potential to spark broader changes. The following day, Mrs. Reynolds called Karen to thank her for bringing the issue to light and invited her to speak at the school's next faculty meeting. "We need someone with your experience to help us ensure we're fostering an inclusive and respectful environment," the principal said. Karen agreed, seeing the invitation as an opportunity to address not just Mr. Whitaker's behavior, but also the systemic issues that allowed it to go unchecked. When she arrived at the meeting, the room was filled with teachers, administrators, and staff. Many had heard about the confrontation with Mr. Whitaker and were eager to hear what Karen had to say. Standing at the front of the room, Karen began her presentation with a calm but commanding presence. "I'm here today not to point fingers, but to spark a conversation about how we, as adults, shape the environments where children learn and grow," she said. "Every word we say, every action we take, can either build a child's confidence or chip away at it. We have a responsibility to be mindful of that." Karen shared stories from her legal work, highlighting the ways implicit bias and unequal treatment had harmed students. She also presented practical strategies for fostering inclusivity in classrooms, such as encouraging open dialogue, recognizing individual strengths, and being conscious of unintentional bias. Among the attendees was Mr. Whitaker, who listened intently to Karen's words. As she spoke about the lasting impact teachers could have on their students, he felt a deep sense of regret for how he had treated Maya. He realized that his dismissive comments had stemmed from his own unconscious biases he hadn't taken the time to examine. After the meeting, Mr. Whitaker approached Karen. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice sincere, "I want to thank you for what you said today. I've been reflecting on my behavior, and I realize now how wrong I was. I owe Maya and every student I've let down more than an apology. I owe them change." Karen smiled warmly. "Acknowledging the issue is the first step," she said. "The next step is doing the work to make things right. I believe you can." News of the incident and Karen's advocacy spread throughout the school and the wider community. Parents began discussing their own concerns about bias in the classroom, and many reached out to Karen for guidance. Inspired by her example, a group of parents and teachers formed a committee dedicated to promoting inclusivity and respect in the school. The committee organized workshops for teachers and parents, focusing on cultural awareness and effective communication. Karen played an active role, providing resources and sharing her expertise. Her presence brought a sense of hope and momentum to the community, showing that change was possible when people worked together. For Maya, the experience was transformative. Seeing her mother stand up to Mr. Whitaker gave her a newfound sense of confidence and pride. She began participating more actively in class discussions, no longer afraid of being singled out or mocked. Her classmates noticed the change, and many were inspired by her resilience. One afternoon, a friend approached Maya after class. "You're really brave," they said. "What your mom did was amazing, but so was the way you handled everything. You didn't let it stop you." Maya smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Thanks," she said. "I just hope it helps everyone, not just me." As the dust settled, the incident became a catalyst for lasting change. Mr. Whitaker, now more aware of his actions, made a genuine effort to improve his teaching methods and create a more supportive environment for his students. Maya's classmates, too, began to see the value of speaking up when they witnessed unfair treatment. For Karen, the experience reaffirmed her belief in the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter how difficult it might seem. She continued her work as an advocate, knowing that every small victory contributed to a larger fight for justice and equality. In the weeks following the incident, Green Hill Middle School underwent a noticeable transformation. Karen Thompson's powerful confrontation with Mr. Whitaker had sparked a wave of reflection, change, and accountability that reached every corner of the school. The school administration, led by Principal Reynolds, took swift action to address the systemic issues that had allowed incidents like Maya's to occur. Teachers participated in mandatory training sessions focused on identifying and addressing implicit bias, fostering inclusivity, and creating safe learning environments for all students. During one session, teachers shared their own experiences and acknowledged moments where they could have done better. Mr. Whitaker, in particular, spoke openly about how the confrontation had been a turning point for him. "I didn't realize how my words and actions could affect my students so deeply," he admitted. "It's not enough to mean well. I have to actively ensure that my classroom is a space where every student feels valued." The school also established an ongoing student feedback program, allowing students to anonymously share their concerns or experiences with teachers and staff. This new initiative empowered students to voice their thoughts without fear of repercussions and ensured the administration remained accountable. For Maya, the incident marked a turning point in her own life. Her mother's fearless advocacy had shown her that no one deserved to be treated unfairly, and that standing up for what was right could bring about real change. Maya began to embrace her voice, participating more actively in class discussions and even joining the school's debate team. One day, during a science class, Mr. Whitaker called on Maya to answer a complex question. She answered confidently, her explanation thorough and precise. Instead of the dismissive tone he had used in the past, Mr. Whitaker responded with genuine praise. "Excellent work, Maya," he said. "Your explanation was spot on." The class erupted into quiet applause, and Maya smiled, her confidence shining brightly. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a sign that change was possible when people were held accountable and given the opportunity to grow. Karen's actions didn't stop with her daughter's school. The attention the incident had garnered inspired her to advocate for broader changes in the education system. Partnering with local organizations and parent groups, she launched a campaign to address systemic bias and promote cultural awareness in schools across the district. At a community forum, Karen delivered a speech that resonated deeply with parents and educators alike. "Our children deserve to learn in environments where they are respected and encouraged to reach their full potential," she said. "When we hold ourselves accountable, when we address our biases head-on, we pave the way for a brighter, more equitable future." For every student, Karen's campaign gained momentum, leading to district-wide initiatives such as teacher mentorship programs, updated curricula that celebrated diversity, and regular forums to foster open dialogue between parents, students, and educators. Meanwhile, Mr. Whitaker committed himself to becoming a better teacher. He sought mentorship from colleagues who were skilled in fostering inclusive classrooms and began reading extensively about cultural competence and the impact of unconscious bias. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. During a staff meeting, Principal Reynolds commended Mr. Whitaker for his willingness to learn and grow. "Growth isn't about perfection," she said. "It's about recognizing where we fall short and working to improve. Mr. Whitaker has shown that change is possible when we take responsibility for our actions." For Mr. Whitaker, the process was humbling, but it also became deeply rewarding. He found himself connecting with students on a deeper level and earning their trust in a way he never had before. The broader school community rallied behind the changes, inspired by Karen's example and Maya's resilience. Parents, teachers, and students worked together to create an environment where respect and empathy were at the forefront. During a school assembly, Maya was invited to speak about her experience. Standing confidently before her peers, she said, "This isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one feels invisible or unworthy. We all have a voice, and when we use it to stand up for what's right, we can create real change." Her words were met with a standing ovation, and many students later shared that they felt empowered to speak up in their own lives. The incident left a lasting impact, not just on Maya and her school, but on everyone who heard the story. It became a testament to the power of standing up against prejudice, the importance of accountability, and the ability of individuals to drive systemic change. For Karen, the experience reinforced her belief that advocacy begins at home. "I didn't just do this for Maya," she said during an interview. "I did it for every child who's ever been made to feel small or unworthy. Every voice matters, and it's our responsibility to ensure that every child knows that." For Mr. Whitaker, it was a lesson in humility and growth. He reflected often on Karen's words and the courage Maya showed. "They taught me something I'll carry with me for the rest of my career," he said. "Teaching isn't just about sharing knowledge. It's about building up every child who walks into my classroom." The story of Maya Thompson and her mother Karen is a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up for what's right. What began as a moment of humiliation in the classroom became a transformative experience, not just for Maya and her teacher, but for the entire school community. It's a testament to the power of resilience, advocacy, and accountability. Karen's courage in confronting injustice showed the lasting impact one voice can have, while Mr. Whitaker's willingness to reflect and grow proved that change is possible when we take responsibility for our actions. For Maya, this experience became a lesson in self-worth and empowerment, inspiring her to embrace her voice and potential. What about you? Have you ever faced or witnessed injustice? And how did you respond? What would you do if you were in Maya or Karen's position? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story moved or inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that challenge perspectives and ignite change. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with another powerful tale of resilience and justice. Until then, remember, every voice matters, and every act of courage can make a difference.